Marinator, and we're here today with a special guest chef, Jeff Gibson.
Hi, I'm Jeff Gibson. I'm with Student Diversity and Inclusion, and I serve as the Assistant Director for Student Diversity Inclusion and LGBTQ initiatives.
We're here today to bring a little bit of the Mediterranean to you. We're making Greek food, so we're going to have a wide variety of dishes. We're going to make Spanakopita, or in English that translates to spinach pie, chicken souvlaki or chicken shish kebabs, and then Horiatiki salata, which if you translate it literally means village salad.
I would have never been able to say that.
So village salad, it's a really simple salad. Other people just call it Greek Horiatiki salad. So that's what we're making. I'm gonna take you through and show you our ingredients before we get cooking. For our meal today, I'm going to start off by pointing out our skewers. We're using wooden skewers for the souvlaki or the kebabs, and so we're actually already pre-soaking them in water. You want to make sure that you soak them in water so that way once they get put on the grill, they don't catch on fire. That would be highly unfortunate, and you'd lose a lot more than just your meal at this point. All right. Moving on, for our spinach pie, we're gonna use spinach. This is baby spinach. We got the one that's already been pre-washed and ready to eat. You can either get one large container, or I didn't find that in the grocery store, so I bought two of the smaller ones. We also have filo dough for our spinach pie. This is just the Athens brand. Some people even make their own filo dough, so if you are feeling ambitious, by all means, go ahead and make that. Then we will need our Feta cheese. That's a staple in any Greek dish. Unfortunately, I could not find the blocked Feta cheese, so I ended up buying crumbled cheese. For some people, that's actually a perk. They don't have to go ahead and crumble the Feta cheese on their own. I like to actually buy it in the brine and crumble it on my own, but you know, you gotta do what you gotta do. And then we're gonna work with our olive oil, and so some people traditionally put butter in between each layer of filo dough when they're making the dish. I like to make it a little heart healthier, so I use my extra virgin olive oil. And then we'll be using 2 eggs. And then last but not least, we'll have our dill. This is just a spice. It's actually not very pungent when it's actually in the dish. So for anyone that's a little skeptical about dill, I recommend giving spinach pie a try. And then we have our leeks. And so leeks are in the onion family, and we'll show you how to clean them and actually slice them up and saute them when we start cooking. Now, for the actual kebabs, I pointed out the skewers. We also have some bell peppers that we will be putting in between each piece of chicken to kind of help break it up and add some flavor. And then we'll also be using some of our grape tomatoes in there. And then last but not least, the actual star of the souvlaki is our chicken. And so I made sure to go ahead and actually thaw this for about 24 hours. I thawed it in a bowl on the bottom shelf of the fridge, and you want to make sure that you keep it on the bottom shelf just so that way if any juices were to leak out, the bowl will catch it and then it won't go spilling onto your fresh produce that you might not necessarily cook. Okay, and then for our Horiatiki salata, we're going to use Kalamata olives. I went ahead and bought the pitted olives, but if you don't want to buy pitted olives and you want to pit them on your own, by all means, go for it. And then I have our cucumbers right here. So we're going to be using about 2.5 cucumbers. The other half of the cucumber we'll use to make a Tzatziki sauce, which is a Greek yogurt sauce. And we'll use that to actually end up dipping our chicken in. And then we also have our onion. This is our red onion. I'm not a huge fan of red onions, which is why we're not using very much. But you can go ahead and use a whole red onion if you like. And then we also have Feta cheese for our salad. Again, I told you that was a staple. And our tomatoes, if you grow your own tomatoes, feel free to use your own garden fresh tomatoes. Right now, I don't think anybody's plants have actually produced a tomato yet. But once they do at the end of the summer, feel free to use your own homemade or your homegrown ones. so Jeff finished cutting up the chicken and I finished chopping or mincing the garlic. So I'm gonna go ahead and pour a half cup of EVOO into our measuring cup here. You could make the marinade in a bowl, but I just figure since we're using the measuring cup to measure it out anyway, why not make the marinade in here? It saves on cleanup, and I'm all about saving on cleanup. All right, so we got our half cup of extra virgin olive oil in here. So fun fact, Jeff, extra virgin olive oil actually means that it's the first press of the olives. So almost like the freshest squeeze from the olives. All right, and then we're gonna pour in a 1/4 cup of balsamic vinegar. So I'm just gonna look and measure as it's going in. One thing you'll notice, vinegar and olive oil don't mix, so we will be mixing it together to fully emulsify it. All right, and at this point, I am going to add my garlic into my marinade. Oh, thank you. If your hands are sticky, it's okay. That happens with garlic. I've heard some people talk about like if you put coconut oil on your hands first, it helps like eliminate, I guess, like the long-lasting smell. All right, and then how do you open your salt?
So new kitchen, new ingredient.
Yeah. All right, and we're going to add in, I'd say a 1/2 teaspoon of sea salt, just because sea salt is a little bit more potent than your regular salt. Since this is in a grinder, we're just gonna guesstimate. That looks good. All right, and then 1 teaspoon of oregano. Opening this is always a trip. There we go. got some everywhere. And we're just gonna sprinkle it on top. You can make the marinade your own too. Like if you wanted to add some honey and some mustard, you could do that for added flavor. It's really up to you. This is pretty simple, it's easy, and I think a lot of people have these ingredients in their house, so it's nothing super elaborate that you feel like you have to go out and buy. And then 1 teaspoon of ground black pepper. And now we're gonna go ahead and take a fork. Do you have a fork?
Fork, or do you want to whisk?
Oh, we could do both. I was a fork, but.
Just even whisk it up.
Whoa! Okay, Jeff has a fancy whisk, so we're just gonna whisk it all together. And then as soon as you feel like it's thoroughly mixed, you're gonna go ahead and pour it over your chicken, which is in a bag. You can choose to marinate the chicken in a bowl, but again, for easy cleanup, I think the Ziploc bag works best. Okay, so to show you all what it looks like, see, nice and whisked together. Just to let you know, balsamic vinegar, even though it is a vinegar, it's a little bit of a sweeter vinegar, so it adds that, I don't know, it has like a pungent but sweet taste all in one, and so it really complements the garlic and the chicken.
It goes great with tomatoes.
It does go great with tomatoes. I always feel bad leaving garlic behind. I love garlic. Some doctors have actually said that garlic can help lower cholesterol levels. So researchers researchers have looked into that. And then I know that there are some people that they'll go talk with their doctor before being put on cholesterol medication. They'll try to clean up their diet and they'll add a lot of garlic into it.
And it keeps vampires away.
There we go. All right, so you can go ahead and just pour it over.
So we're pouring it in the chicken here.
And then, Jeff, if you want to zip up or like seal the bag and then kind of massage the chicken.
Yep, I'm gonna let the air out of the bag as well.
Okay, so while we're letting our chicken marinate, we're gonna go ahead and put it in a large bowl. Again, that way, if any of the juices were to leak out of the Ziploc bag, the bowl would catch it, and we're gonna place it back in the fridge for food safety reasons. We don't wanna just keep it out. All right, so while our chicken is marinating, we're gonna go ahead and begin making our Spanakopita. And so the first step that I always start off with is cleaning our leeks. So leeks, as I mentioned earlier, are part of the onion family. They grow in the ground, so they get very dirty. They're full of dirt, which is a-okay. It just means that you have to be really vigilant about washing them. So we went ahead and washed, well actually Jeff did this, not we. Jeff washed the outside of the leek already. So we're just gonna go ahead and slice off the bottom. So you can see the roots here, we don't need that part. You can buy a bunch of leeks, literally one bunch comes with all 3 of these together. So, and that's all you need for this recipe. So if anyone ever tells you, yeah, you need 3 leeks, they mean 1 bunch. They don't mean 3. 3 bunches, you'd have quite a bit of leeks. All right, so we cut off the ends, and now I'm gonna go ahead and basically cut down the middle and begin peeling the layers off, almost like an onion. So that outside one, I always actually throw away the outside one. See, it's actually, you guys can see all the dirt here. So I always throw away the outside layer, and then some people, so you only use like, you actually throw away probably where the leeks begin to wilt. You would break that off and you wouldn't use that. Some people wash it, or some people actually just go ahead and cut it off from the beginning. So I'm gonna go ahead and just cut it all off now.
There might be a lot of agreement then.
Yeah. All right, and so then we're just gonna go ahead, and part of the reason why you separate them like this is so that that way you can actually get all the dirt off when you're washing the onion or the leek. So we're gonna go ahead and keep separating the leeks and then show you how we go ahead and wash them. So we're ready to wash our leeks. We've turned on our cold water, and you're just literally gonna go ahead and kind of scrub using your hands. Leeks are pretty fragile, as you can see, so you don't want to take this intense scrubber to them and end up like breaking them up and destroying them. And just scrub until the dirt is gone. So really you kind of eyeball it. You just don't want to be eating the dirt. That's really the main part for doing this. But see, it's nice and clean now. And then we're gonna just let it dry there. As you get into the inner layers, you don't have to do as much scrubbing, just because the outer layers have, in essence, protected it from the dirt. So that's actually really nice. But I'll show you an outer layer and how it's actually, this one's good. See how much dirt we have on this? And you'll just sit there and scrub, scrub, scrub. Until the dirt comes off. Look at that. Clean. All right, so we went ahead and we rinsed all our leeks like you saw, and then because it takes a little bit of time, we already went ahead and pre-chopped or diced, how these are actually chopped, the leeks, and put them in a pan because we are going to saute them. I do want to show you how to go ahead and actually chop them though. So with this last bunch, I actually just took it, and with your knife, you can kind of see it's already begun to rip down the middle. Just continue that straight down so you have a bunch of thin pieces. And then I group it all together and you just chop. Oops, that was, just chop, take the knife away from you. And so when you are chopping, you want to remember, instead of holding your hand like this, where you could potentially slice off a finger, have almost more of a flat surface where the knife would just slide down if something happened. And so keep bringing it. My eyes are kind of watering because leeks are in the onion family. These are pretty potent. But when you are shopping for leeks, they're actually pretty easy. You just need to look to make sure that the leaves up top, they might look a little damaged, but you don't want super wilted. You don't want anything brown that's not dirt. So that's your quick shopping tip on leeks. As soon as I finish chopping these up, we're gonna go ahead and prep the dill. And so I bought fresh dill, and Jeff went ahead and already washed it because you did have to rinse it. And so if you do buy it, make sure that you wash it, you let it dry a little bit, and then we're gonna go ahead and chop that up finely too, dump it into the pan, and then saute it all together. So we'll meet you on the stove.
We have our leeks and our dill over here on the stove on about medium heat, and just kind of mix it in right now. And what I'm gonna do is add in olive oil. So about 1 to 2 tablespoons of that. So just gonna eyeball it. So I cook a lot, so I'm familiar enough. So we're just gonna go ahead and do that. That's probably good there. And we're just gonna give that a nice stir, and just kind of continue to watch it as it cooks down. We don't want it to burn or anything like that, but we definitely want it to cook like you normally do for like sauteing onions, because it is very similar.
You can smell it. It
Yes.
smells really good.
It really does smell good. And then the olive oil just completely brought out more of those lovely smells. So the thing about leeks, it is something that is used across the world. So you think a lot of different dishes outside of the United States utilize them. I think here in the US, we're most familiar with utilizing different types of onion, whether it be yellow, red, or like shallots. But in both countries around the world, you see leeks being used. So I definitely recommend trying it out as something different.
Okay, so not sure if you guys can hear this, but it is beginning to sizzle. Yeah. So that's a good way to know that the onions or the leeks are beginning to cook. If you aren't a fan of leeks and or if you can't find leeks in the supermarket, you could use onion for this. It won't have the same authentic Spanakopita taste, but you could use onions. Some people aren't fans of leeks, so that's the other reason why they'd use it, or they feel like onions are just easier to cook with. All right, so while Jeff is sauteing the leeks and the dill, I'm gonna go ahead and begin prepping our spinach. So I really like using spinach in a lot of my meals. You'll see that a lot of the videos I've made all involve spinach. Obviously, spinach is one of the stars of Spanakopita, hence spinach pie. I mentioned earlier I went ahead and bought the thoroughly washed spinach, so that way I could just go ahead and dump it into the bowl. It's purely convenience, honestly. The nice thing about spinach is that it's really high in iron, and then if you also read the box, it's a good source of vitamin A, C, and folate. So it is a really nutrient-dense dish. The iron comes from the dark green leafy vegetable piece. It doesn't get much darker than this. And so I'm just gonna go ahead and add all of my spinach into a large mixing bowl. This might seem like a lot right now, but once the dill and the leeks are finished cooking, we're gonna just put them in on top here, and it'll kind of help, I guess, lessen it. Spinach is very airy, but when it does come into contact with heat, it begins to shrivel up. And so that'll happen, and that'll give us more room to work in the bowl. So I'll see you once we're ready to pour the leeks and the dill in. All right, so as you can see, our leeks have sauteed. They're translucent, and then the dill has basically disappeared in there. So that's gone away. That's why I said if you're not a big fan of dill, you don't really have to worry. You're not going to notice that it's in here. So since this is done cooking and some of them even began to caramelize a little, we're gonna go ahead and dump it into our bowl with the spinach. Ooh, look at all the steam coming. All right, and so as I'm scraping it out here, I'll tell you what we're gonna do next. We're gonna go ahead and add in about a pound of Feta cheese. The crumbled Feta only comes in 12-ounce containers, a little bit short of a pound, but it's okay. Jeff isn't the biggest fan of Feta cheese, so it's a good compromise. All right, so we will, as soon as I finish getting all this out, we'll show you how it looks once we add the Feta. All right, so we're gonna add our Feta in. If you remember when I showed you at the beginning, this already came crumbled. I personally like to get Feta in the brine, where it's literally a square and you crumble it on its own, but couldn't find that at the grocery store, so this is what we're working with. If you want a lower fat option, they do also make a reduced fat Feta. As for the brand, it doesn't really matter. You can buy whatever brand Feta your store has to offer. So I'm just gonna go ahead, if you remember I said this was 12 ounces, so a little short of a pound. And I'm just gonna sprinkle it in. Some of these crumbles are a little bigger than what you would normally hand crumble it to, but that's okay because once we end up mixing it all together, they'll end up crumbling. So actually traditional feta is made from sheep or goat's milk, not cow's milk, but here in the US when you buy feta you do tend to get it domestic unless it specifically says that it is not domestic feta. So at Target or Walmart here in town, I've just been buying this Athenos feta, and that one is domestic, so it's made out of cow's milk. All right, I'm gonna go ahead. You might need to actually use your hands to fully incorporate everything, but for now I'm just kind of mixing things together with my wooden spoon, or if you have a spatula, that'll work too. And then the next thing that we're gonna add are our 2 eggs.
All right, so next we have our 2 eggs. We're gonna go ahead and mix those in there. So crack up some eggs. And I get the other one over here as well. That one didn't crack so well. Usually I can get them one-handed, but not always.
Yeah, that was some skill.
The thing important with eggs, like normally I like to put my eggs in first, especially when you're baking, so then if you do get eggshells in, you can easily scoop them out. But what you can do, if you do get eggshell in, just take one of them and just scoop it right out, and it's simple and easy to do. No eggshells in, so we're good. So I'm just going to go ahead and mix that in here. And you want to make sure it's all well coated with the eggs. And you might have to use your hands just to get in there and make sure it's all mixed in. I did wash my hands, so make sure that whatever you're doing, you do have clean hands. That is really important. Hygiene is important. So I'm just going to go ahead and do it. I'm going to get all the spinach off my spatula here. I'm just going to go in. It's the easiest way to do it. Use your human tools. Alright, and I'm really messy when I cook, so I just get it everywhere. So try to not get it everywhere like I do. But it is mixing in here really nice as well, and it smells so good. With all the dill and the feta, spinach, and I probably said feta wrong. We almost lost the camera. That was actually really close. Great. So as you can see, it's all mixed in there. And the next step we'll work on is prepping our filo dough.
Okay, so we're ready to start assembling our Spanakopita. We have our filo dough. So when you actually open up the filo dough, it comes in a packet, and it kind of actually they have it wrapped up so you can unwrap it and use this bottom piece as kind of your placemat on the kitchen counter. And then unfold it. They folded theirs. Okay, one thing about filo dough is it is very thin, and so it can also become really dry and brittle very quickly. So we have a very damp, well, it's actually not super damp. We did make sure to wring it out, but it's paper towels that every time we're not using the filo dough, we're just gonna cover it to help keep the moisture in and help keep it fresher longer. All right, so to start off, I'm gonna fill up a little bowl with some olive oil. The olive oil, or the little bowl, is really just for convenience, so that way we can pour the brush in. And so I always use a good amount. All right. So I probably poured in around 1/4 of a cup, between 1/4 and 1/2. If you need more olive oil, you'll just pour it in as you're ready to go. But so you're gonna take your pastry brush and just dip it in, and then basically like you're painting, you're just gonna paint the bottom of your pan, and I even go around on the sides too, so that way nothing sticks. When you are assembling the Spanakopita, after you put a piece of filo dough down, you will go ahead and brush it with olive oil. So that way when it rises, it separates nicely and it doesn't become one sticky mess in the oven. I might get a little more. Some people actually make their own filo dough. Jeff's made it before. Want to tell us about it?
Oh, it's been years. It's a pretty easy process to do. It just takes patience because it is a very thin dough. So definitely, it's a process, but it is definitely doable. And it's not going to be perfect the first time you do it, so it does take practice just like anything in life.
I know a lot of, depending on what part of Greece you're from, some people still to this day make their own filo dough, but my parents talk about growing up, they knew people that always made their own dough. And fun fact, for those of you who have a sweet tooth, you also use filo dough for baklava. So
yeah, and that's how I've made it before.
Okay. All right, so if you can see right here, it's lined, and then I'm gonna go ahead and you don't wanna like completely soak your brush, just dip it in and then paint. So this is a bit of a process, and we're not gonna keep you here to watch us paint and put down like 8 layers of filo dough, but you wanna put down around 8 layers on the bottom, depending on how much filo dough you have. You just wanna make sure that you keep more filo dough for the top part of your spanakopita. If you have a lot of filo dough and if you have a lot of the spinach mixture, you can actually choose to kind of layer it like you would a cake, for example, but we're just gonna do a bottom layer, the spinach mixture, and then a top layer. All right, we'll see you when we're pouring in the spinach mixture. Okay, so we got our 8 layers of filo dough down at the bottom, and we've nicely coated all of it with olive oil. So we're gonna go ahead and add the spinach mixture. If you remember correctly, this has the spinach, the leeks, the dill, the feta cheese, and our 2 eggs in it. And so we're gonna go ahead and add it all in at once in here.
And I'm just gonna, my hands are clean, really important. I'm just gonna go ahead and just pile it in, but we're gonna make it look pretty too.
You kind of spread it out. So at this point too, you can go ahead and begin preheating your oven. We are gonna preheat our oven to 350 degrees. If it finishes preheating before you're done assembling the filo dough, that's completely fine. When you do cook it, I'll remind you again before we put it in, you wanna cook it until it becomes golden brown, or I guess the time is like 45 minutes, between 45 minutes to an hour, depending on your stove, but you definitely want to check it at the 45-minute mark to see where it's looking. You'll notice that the filo dough does begin to separate from itself, and it does turn a really nice golden brown color. All right, so
nice and even.
Yeah, Jeff did a really good job of putting it down here. We can't wait to eat it because it smells amazing. And so we're gonna take our next layer of filo dough and just put it down. Well, I ripped part of that.
It's a process.
It is a process. We're keeping it real. All right, and then since his hands are kind of kind of dirty, I'll go ahead and just paint the olive oil on again. On this piece of filo dough, it might feel a little funny just because it's right up against the spinach, but you're doing it correct. Don't worry about how it feels or even how it looks. So we're gonna go ahead and use the remaining filo dough, which is around like 10 more layers of filo dough. We're gonna go ahead and place that down, and we'll show you what it looks like right before we put it in the oven. Okay, so we finished layering our filo dough, and so this is the completed spanakopita. Right before we put it in the oven, we are going to tuck in the edges, so you can just use a knife in your fingers, and you can see the filo dough, there was a lot of excess over the sides. You just wanna tuck it in, and when it does finish, like if you've ever seen spanakopita or baklava, it looks like it's been almost folded very nicely. It's literally just the people tucking it in like this, or the baker, the creator of it, I guess, the chef. And then as soon as we finish tucking it all in, we're going to go ahead and score it just so that way some of the heat escapes and it'll help with the moisture, so that way you don't end up with a very runny spanakopita. All right, to score it, I just gently cut down. It doesn't have to be in the straightest line. My line isn't straight. And you don't want to cut all the way through, just kind of break through the top layer of filo dough. So I'm going to score mine into 3 separate sections. And then I even score it this way a few times. You don't have to follow these lines when you are actually cutting it. You can create your own lines to get the size piece that you want. All right, and so we're gonna go ahead and put it in the oven. It finished preheating. We heard the beep, and then we'll check up on it in 45 minutes to see how it's turned golden brown and to see if it's actually ready to be done. All right. And all right, so it's in the oven. We'll set our timer for 45 minutes. While it's cooking, we're gonna go ahead and begin making our Horiatiki salata, or our Greek salad. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've begun making the Horiatiki salata. Really, it's simple. It's just tomatoes, and honestly, we're using red tomatoes, but if you have tomatoes from your garden that aren't red, like orange or yellow, feel free to use those. Cucumbers, and then we'll chop up some red onion and add the olives and the Feta cheese in there before making our vinaigrette. So just to show you, we went ahead and peeled the cucumber, and these were European cucumbers, also known as seedless cucumbers. They do still have some seeds to them. They're just very fine compared to the other cucumbers where the seeds are actually like pretty visible. So we cut it in half, and then I'm gonna go ahead and cut the half in half lengthwise, and then put it face down or open face down and cut again. And then if you just line them up really quickly, you can cut both at once. Actually, the nice thing about this salad is that it's okay for it to be chunky. So in essence, the chunkier the better. You obviously don't want these huge chunks, you want to cut it, but something like this is appropriate in this type of salad. So I'm gonna go ahead and add my cucumber. All right, and now we're gonna go ahead and cut our tomatoes. We went ahead and pre-washed these tomatoes. Whenever you're dealing with fresh produce, please make sure that you wash it. It's just for like hygiene and keeping things clean. You don't wanna be touching something or eating something raw that everyone else has touched with their hands. So we're just gonna take it and then slice it vertically down. Again, we've already done most of ours, but I'll show you how we cut it. Tomatoes are actually a fruit that we eat as a vegetable, and they are a high source of lycopene and vitamin C. So a lot of people forget that tomatoes have vitamin C. They think of our citrus fruits as being high in vitamin C. These are actually grape tomatoes, not cherry tomatoes. That's what they're labeled as. But these, if you ask me, look like little squashes, to be honest with you. When you are buying tomatoes, you want to make sure that they have a nice vibrant color to them, that they're a nice red, and they don't have any brown spots on them. If they do, that means that they're probably going bad, so you really don't want to buy them. Action.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and cut up our onions. So I have a portion of a red onion here. We've already chopped up a little bit, but just gonna show you what we're looking at in terms of size. Just gonna go ahead, give it a nice little chop here. And the size of pieces that we're looking for are pretty close to this. So I wouldn't go much smaller. You could go a little bit bigger, but it's more about what is your personal preference. But I think just doing this size is a pretty good size to start out with. So I'm just gonna finish cutting these up here as we move on. The next thing that we'll add in here are our Kalamata olives. Sonia, you want to correct me on how to say those properly?
Kalamata olives.
Yep, so we'll just go ahead and we'll take a handful of those, just put them right in. We're not dicing them up or anything for that. And we'll continue to add those as well. We're just going to go for all of them.
The nice thing about them is they're already pitted too.
Yes. So if you're unfamiliar with it, most salads do come with pits. So you can, it's probably really hard to see because it's really dark. I don't know if they're fruits or berries or how would you describe an olive. But they are already pitted, and that's what we want because you do not want to be eating any pits. So we'll finish those off. We did drain them already as well, so it's coming out a little bit at the end. We didn't get them all the way drained, but that is something that you also want to do prior. All right, so next we're gonna go in and put in our Feta. So trying to say things appropriately and correct here. We already talked about it. We used it earlier as well, so it is already a crumbly cheese. So we're just gonna go ahead and crumble it right on. There are some bigger chunks in there as well, so just kind of break them up as necessary. And really for this, you can put in as much or as little as you want. I'm not a super big fan of it, but we are going to be generous with our cheeses here and putting it in. So once we got our desired amount of cheese in, what we're going to go ahead and do is just toss it all together. That way it's nice and mixed, and that we're getting every single flavor in our bites. So I'm just going to continue on doing that, and we'll move on to our next dish.
All right, so now that we have our salad ready and assembled, we're going to go ahead and make our vinaigrette. So you don't want a heavy dressing for this. Obviously, once you make it, if you feel like you need more, by all means go for it. But we're gonna start off with about a 1/4 cup of extra virgin olive oil. So pouring that in my measuring cup. Okay. And then traditionally you would use either lemon, not really limes, but I mean, I guess if you had limes, you could use that too. Or red wine vinegar. They did not have red wine vinegar at the store when I went this morning, so we're using apple cider vinegar, putting a little bit of American twist on Greek salad, on Horiatiki Salata. But you know what? Apple cider vinegar is chock full of nutrients, so it's not a bad alternative. So I'm gonna go ahead and measure out 2 tablespoons. Some people actually take a shot of apple cider vinegar in the morning for their health anyway. Okay, and then we're gonna go ahead, our seasonings again are pretty easy. We're gonna use 1 teaspoon of oregano. Oregano is a staple in Greek cooking. We don't use a whole lot of seasoning, but we always tend to use salt, pepper, and oregano. So those are gonna be your top 3 that you find. And then our pepper. All right, and then this would be like 1/2 teaspoon, but right now we're just gonna, all right, guesstimate. I really do enjoy using peppercorn grinders or sea salt grinders. All right, and now we're just gonna whisk it all together. Again, I told you that vinegar and oil separate, so we need to emulsify them, which means that we really beat it all up together, mix it. All right, and so if you want to see what it looks like, it's all mixed in. And we're just gonna go ahead and pour it on top of the salad now. The nice thing about this salad is because it doesn't have lettuce, it will actually keep for quite a few days in the fridge. If you didn't put the vinaigrette, it could keep all the way up to a week in the fridge, because really all it is cucumbers, tomatoes, and onions. And then feta and gamata olives are already kind of preserved.
All right, so the Spanakopita is ready. As you can see, it has a nice golden crust from the filo dough, nice and flaky as well. And you're gonna wanna let that cool. So about 15 to 20 minutes or so, and just let that cool down before serving, and then it'll be all set and ready to go.
All All right, so we're ready to make our tzatziki. Tzatziki is a Greek yogurt dipping sauce. A lot of people tend to have it on the side with their chicken or grilled meat. I personally love it, kind of whether the meat is on the grill or not. It's nice and refreshing. So it's really simple. We're gonna use non-fat Greek yogurt. So we're using Faya 0% Greek yogurt. Greek yogurt is nice and thick in consistency. And then we're gonna use a cucumber, and we have a zester / microplane. We're just gonna go ahead and zest it over the container of yogurt. So fun fact, I already went ahead and did some of this ahead of time. You might wanna remove the seeds if you are using cucumbers that have big chunky seeds in them, just because they contain a lot of water. If you don't, that's completely fine too. If you'd like a little bit more of a I guess leaner and rather than like thick yogurt dipping sauce, the water from the cucumber will help get that consistency so it won't be as thick and chunky. All right, so we finished with that, and then I went ahead earlier and chopped up some dill and then 4 cloves of garlic, so we have it right here. And I'm just gonna go ahead and dump that into our yogurt container. I might actually mix it a little bit beforehand. And to mix it, all you really need is a spatula to just stir it around. If you wanna put it in a bowl on its own, you can, that's actually great, but again, I like minimal cleanup, so I just use the yogurt container, and it's a nice way for me to store it for future use. So we're gonna just go ahead and finish mixing this all up, and we'll show you what it looks like when we're ready to eat our kebabs. All right, so it's time to assemble our souvlaki or our kebabs. We have our meat, our chicken that was marinating. I'm just gonna be honest, it did marinate for like 5 hours. It took us a while to cook all this. All right, so we're gonna start off. We have some cherry tomatoes. You can use onions, peppers, mushrooms, whatever you want, but we have extra cherry tomatoes. So you're just gonna take your skewer and poke it through. Be careful not to poke yourself. Okay, and you only want to leave about like, I don't know, this is a 1/4 inch at the very end. And then you're gonna take your meat and stick it through, kebab it. That one's a big chunk, so we're just gonna do one, and then another tomato. If you have smaller chunks of meat, you can go ahead and do 2 at a time. And then another tomato. And I'm gonna grab more meat. Stick that through. And then one last tomato. And we are ready to grill it. When you are grilling, you wanna make sure that you cook chicken to an internal temperature of 165 if you are using a meat thermometer. Or you can kind of tell when you're flipping it, the meat will go from looking like this to becoming more solid in shape, and it'll become white instead of translucent. So we'll show you what the finished product looks like, and we'll catch you out on the grill.
All right, so our chicken is on the grill, and we're gonna let it cook until an internal temperature of 165, and then we'll be ready to put our whole entire meal together. All right, so our food is done.
Voila!
It was a day, but it
Yes.
was awesome, and now we have some amazing food. So I don't know if you all know this or not, but Sonia is 1st generation Greek, so hence why we're making some of the food. You want to share like some of like your memories, or why did we decide to do these dishes today?
Yeah, sure. So as Jeff said, I'm a 1st generation Greek American. All of these dishes, I guess, are something that I grew up with. So they're definitely, I mean, just due to weather, they're definitely more summer dishes like chicken souvlaki and tzatziki. Although I mentioned earlier, tzatziki is something that I like to eat with meat, whether it's grilled or not. And part of that is just the way I grew up. My mom would oftentimes have tzatziki as a side dish. Spanakopita is a fan favorite. Whenever I go home, even now as an adult, when I go home for Christmas, I always put in a special request to have some spanakopita. So we have it basically at every holiday. Growing up, whether it was Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, just a regular old Sunday dinner with my family, we would always have spanakopita, so that was a big hit. And then Greece, well, it's in the Mediterranean. A lot of the food that Greeks eat, as well as Italians, I'll lump them in there too. It's very light, and so the Horiatiki Salata, it's really light. Some people eat it as a full meal on its own. Some people eat it as a side dish, which we're gonna, eat it with other things here. But even just things like the kalamata olives, I'm very picky. I don't just buy regular black olives. I am very particular about making sure I get my kalamata olives, kind of holding on to those Greek traditions, holding on to my roots. I have family that is from Kalamata, so I might be a little bit more biased when it comes to picking what those olives and to picking that olive oil. But this is definitely something that I grew up with, and I always try, no matter where I am, to recreate it. And the nice thing is here we do have access to the ingredients, so it is something that I can recreate on my own, and it brings back those family memories, and it helps me keep my culture alive, even in North Dakota, where I think I'm the only Greek that's out here.
Yeah, definitely. So I think food is a way that we can come together, and there is a lot of cultural significance to it. I think when we talk about like what is Mediterranean food and what does that look like, things that we don't always have here in North Dakota, or like the types of food that we would even think about having on a regular basis. Olives, for example, olives do not grow in North Dakota, so it's really hard to get those fresh. So there's lots of different food, and it's always tied to culture. We all have our favorite dishes from like our families, or because we grow up in a way centered around different food. So like looking at my family, my fiance's family, very Polish, so we have a lot of kielbasa and pierogies. So lots of different food, and it's a great way that brings families together, and a way to keep culture alive. And I think that's what's most important of it.
It's also a really great way to bring friends together.
Yeah.
So in Greek, there's a word called philoxenia or philoxenia, and it's literally strangers coming together as friends, and you share your food or your culture. And so this is actually a really great example. Jeff and I didn't know each other prior to meeting here at UND. And so we bonded, we've become really good friends, and then here we are cooking together, and we will actually be sharing a meal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's really great. So if you enjoyed this, definitely share with us the meal that you're cooking. If you made this meal, please tag us in it. So you can tag Student Diversity and Inclusion on our Instagram at UND_SDI or on our Facebook page.
And for any of you that are of a different ethnicity or multicultural, please show us what your food looks like, and so that we can share it. So be sure to tag us at UND Wellness, and we will post you on our story.
Awesome.
Well, traditionally, you might hear two things that Greeks say. They'll either end things with opa, which I think basically everybody knows, or they'll end things with stiniyamas, which means to our health. And I think right now with COVID, it couldn't be more appropriate. So, stiniyamas.